Okay, well, hi again. I thought I wanted to start off by sharing with you how I ended up here, because it kind of goes with our stewardship theme that we've been having, and I loved everything we're hearing about this morning. It's great. Several weeks ago, I was driving in my car, and this talk, or whatever you want to call it, just kind of came in my mind, and I was going through all these things, and it was almost a complete thing, and I saw myself up here talking to you guys. And then my brain goes, well, when are you ever going to do that? Boy, that's crazy. So I just tucked it away. And a couple weeks ago, the pastor said he would be away this fifth Sunday, and this little voice says, well, you could volunteer, which I didn't. At least not then. I had to wait a while. And I thought, boy, I'm going to feel silly going to him and saying, can I stand up here? But I went, and he said yes, and I left feeling very good about myself. It's like, okay. Then I got home. And it's like, Eloise, wait a minute. You're going to be playing the piano, going to be playing all that stuff, running around like you always do. How on earth are you going to do this too? And I thought, well, I'll just call him up and say, you know, I really think it's a great idea. Sometime when I'm not doing all that music stuff, I'll do it. And I thought I'll just text him. And there's plenty of time, he can get somebody else. But that day went by and I didn't do it. And the next day went by and I still didn't do it. And I thought, okay, I won't text him, I'll talk to him when I see him. So I got to church, and instead of talking to him, I felt again this just inside spirit like, you can do that. So I go home, and then all the next round of stuff happens, you know, like the stuff like you're going to say stupid things, and you'll put them all to sleep, or you know, all that stuff that we always have. So, no, don't listen to that. We know where that comes from. Well, then the big one came. I threw my back out. And for the next 3 days, I was like this. God, that's got to be a reason to get me out of this. I mean, you know, that's real. You just, you know, I can't stand up there like that. So, well, obviously, that got better. And then this week, when it was getting a little too late to say no, I got one of my sinus things start acting up and sore throat, and by Thursday night I was losing my voice. I'm going, uh-oh. So, well, it's too close now to get out of this, so God, just help me have my voice back. So I laid kind of low for a couple days, and here I am. And it really does fit into the spirit of what the pastor's been presenting to us, the idea of different kinds of volunteering. And I think Sundays, some of them are probably horrible for all of us, but a lot of them are good. You know, we get to come here, we get to see our friends, we get to fellowship, we get to sing, hopefully we listen to some good music, and we get to hear an inspiring sermon, and we might even get to rest in the afternoon a little bit or do something fun. And then Monday morning comes, and the alarm goes off. And most, or a lot of us, it's time to get up, go to school, go to work. I hope some people have a good job. You know, it'd be nice to go in there and most of the time like your job. But I know there's some people out there that don't have a very good job. They just have to do it, so they do it. And maybe some of you have a great job, but you have a rotten boss, and he just really gives you fits, or she. Or maybe some of you don't have either of those, but they're shorthanded and they make you do the work of 3 people. And then you get home, and then what have you got? You've got dinner, and you've got either kids and maybe grandkids or grown-up kids that need you, and you've got bills, and you've got household, and you've got stuff to do, just stuff. And you go to bed at night and drop into bed and going, how did I ever think I'd have time to do anything else? Not going to happen. But some of you aren't in that boat, because there's some people who have been through a surgery and are recuperating, or they've had a long-term illness where they can't do volunteering that they would like to do. They wish they could. And then there's all of you who do volunteer. I said we've heard about wonderful things today, and the neat trunk or treat, that was awesome, and really exciting. And you try and do as much as you can, but sometimes you look around at how many things there are to do, and it's like, I'm one person. I can't possibly cover all those bases myself. And you get tired, or maybe a little burned out feeling. And then there's that wonderful stage that people get to when they get to retire, and all of a sudden they have free time they didn't have, and maybe they get to go places, and you deserve it, you need it, you know? I mean, that's part of what we're supposed to do. So then we're left with the question of, what does God want us to do? How much does God want us to do? How am I going to know what he wants me to do? Am I supposed to just poof, know it? Or how am I going to do this? And that's the question we come to, and we're going to do a little visiting today in our time machine. We're going to start out visiting Moses, and you heard about him this morning. He was at the end of his life. He had followed God's purposes. He had fulfilled them. He had led that children of Israel. I mean, he was an awesome person. But we're not going to visit him anymore there. We're going to go back when he's about 80, and he's staring at a bush. It's a very puzzling bush because it's on fire, and it should be burning up, but it's not. It's not like a big giant bush, that'd take a while to burn up, or a forest or something. It's just a bush. And right now he's out in Midian, which is kind of western Saudi Arabia, and he's taken his sheep way out in the boonies. I mean, he's out there. These boonies, actually, if you look at pictures of that area, it could look like Mars, except for the blue sky. I mean, it is desolate out there. And he's way out there. You know where he is? He's actually kind of by Mount Sinai, which, as you recall, that's where God led them back for the 10 Commandments. And he's been out there 40 long years. And we know Moses' story so well. We know what happened that got him out there. And just to briefly recap that, what a miracle. He was saved from death when he was 3 months old. He was adopted by a princess. His own mother got to take care of him as a toddler. And then when it was time to go to the palace, I mean, this is a true Cinderella story, the rags to riches thing. I mean, slave home, poor, and now he shows up in the palace and gets everything, the finest, the finest. We're even told in Acts that he was educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, not just one area, but all of it, whatever they were, geography, geometry, arithmetic, physics, hieroglyphics. And we're also told from outside sources, in some of the historians, that he was a quick study, he was charismatic, he showed leadership qualities when he was young. And the historian Josephus even mentions that he led an army, Egyptian army, against the Ethiopians in a battle, which I thought was interesting. I hadn't heard that before. So this guy had military experience. He had everything. And we're not told, but it's pretty obvious from reading around the edges that, he knew he was Hebrew. He had sympathy for these people. My goodness, they were in slavery. They were whipped and beaten and treated horribly, and he cared about them. And we know what he did. He went out to visit them and saw an Egyptian beating up one of the Israelites, and he couldn't stand it. He just couldn't stand to see that. And it's like, I've got to do something, just got to do something. Well, he did all right. We know what he did. He killed the Egyptian and buried him. And he thought, boy, I'm doing pretty good. I'm helping out God, man. I'm here. I'm in my position. He goes out the next day to talk to a couple of Hebrews who are fighting with each other, and he's saying, don't do that. That's terrible. And he goes, well, you are judge and jury? Are you going to kill us like you did the Egyptian? So, he's in trouble. Pharaoh's heard about it, and he takes off. He takes off for Midian. And to probably put real irony on it, Egyptians hated shepherds. Way back when Joseph took them to the land of Goshen, he says, don't tell anybody you're a shepherd. Say you're a keeper of livestock, because they hate shepherds. They think they're like the low life. So what does he get to be for 40 whole years? A shepherd out in the wilderness. We know he did marry and had children. I'm sure that brought him joy. But can you imagine if that were you? To drop that far. It's not just like any ordinary, and not just to make a couple bad decisions. He actually murdered someone. He gave up everything and all that special thing that he thought he could do for God, and he sat out there 40 years. He didn't sit out there 40 years with a nice Bible that we got saying what he was going to do when he got done with the 40 years. No, he just sat out there for 40 years. What would you do with that? How would you make sense of it, or shut it behind you, stick it somewhere, do the best you can? You're done for. You've blown it. God can't, how can he use you? You can't even go back there. Until he gets to the bush. And we know a lot of things about the bush, but I really think it's neat. When he first saw the bush, it was just a bush. It wasn't like some big, giant angel person talking to him then. And the bush, or this voice says Moses. And the Hebrew word, it would be kind of like, yeah, that's me. I'm here. And then God identifies himself as his God of Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. And he said, I want you to go back to Egypt and lead the Israelites out of their slavery into a neat land. And the nice translation, well, then, he says he protested. I think it's more like, oh, come on, God. This is ridiculous, like stupid, ridiculous. I'm sorry, you're not stupid, but that idea is stupid. Look, I've been out here for 40 years. I've forgotten everything that I knew before, and even if I didn't, look what I did. I can't go do that. And God says, well, I didn't ask you to go by yourself. I'm going to go with you. Well, Moses is not done complaining. He says, well, look, I can't just go back there and say, this God of my ancestors said to come talk to you. What's your name? And God says, I am that I am. Say, I am has sent you. And God doesn't stop there. He, at that time, told Moses exactly what to do, where to go first. He told him that Pharaoh would harden his heart. He told him about the plagues. He told them that he would get them out of Egypt. And he told them when they left, they would take jewels with them and fancy clothes. He told all of that to Moses standing right there. And Moses' reply is, well, what if they don't believe me? It's like, okay. So all of a sudden, right in front of his nice staff he's holding on to turns into a snake, and he jumps. And of course, it goes back, and the hand, and turns leprous, and then it's clean the next time he takes it out. And God said, show him those things. And if those don't work, take some of the river Nile and put it on land. It will turn to blood. Well, that still wasn't good enough. He says, well, no, can't go, can't speak, just can't speak. That real word there is I'm a slow of tongue. And some people think he really did have a stutter. Maybe he did. Maybe he was trying to be humble. Maybe he was just trying to be ornery and say, no, I'm not going to do it. You've got to have an eloquent speaker. You just can't take me out. That's not going to work. And so God says, but who made your voice? Who made you? And now we get to the real McCoy. You can just see, God, I'm not doing it. Period. In the discussion. And of course, now God's getting kind of mad at him. And he capitulates, lets him take Aaron, who we know did some good things, but he did some rotten things too. He's the one that made the golden calf when Moses was up on the mountain. So that didn't work so well. And of course, after all of that, we know finally, he said yes. And he went. And, I love this because we sometimes get the idea if God just came and talked to us, if he just showed us something or sent us a note or did something that this is my will, please do this, we'd just be jumping at it. I don't think so. I think if we don't want to do it, we don't want to do it. And that's the bottom line. I don't think it matters what God does. And I think that's something we need to think about. All of us, me too. And I think another neat thing we can get, look at the blessings that God gave Moses for obeying him. We know the terrific thing that he did, but did you catch the last thing in the reading? It says that there was no one like Moses in all of Israel after that, because he spoke with God. He was the one on the mountain. He was the one with the shining face. God met that man in a special way after he finally said yes. So what can we get from this? The last thing is, even if you've done something, I'm sure none of us murdered anybody. I'm pretty sure we didn't do that. But you might be thinking, I've messed up a lot of things. God can't use me. I mean, it won't work. And the whole point was, yes, he can, no matter what. And all those years in the desert, Moses needed those as training so he could be in the desert another 40 with the Israelites. We want to watch time because I can get kind of long-winded, but I'm not too long-winded yet. So we're going to look a little bit at one other person. I am keeping an eye back there. Another person in the scripture, and this is Elijah, another one of those big beans. And, at the Mount of Transfiguration with Christ, it was Moses and Elijah that came and stood beside him. I mean, these are the greats. Well, when we peek in on Elijah, he's sitting in a cave. He also is out in the wilderness. And he basically has said, God, nothing I did mattered. It just didn't matter. It made no difference. I'm just done. Done, 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 done. Take me away home. I'm ready to die. I'm a failure. Well, in a way that's surprising because Elijah didn't do what Moses had done. He was a prophet and he was following God. This man did miracles There was the widow Zarephath that he fed for all the months of that where there was this famine. As a matter of fact, the reason for the famine was because there was no rain, and there was no rain because he had marched up to the king at the time, Ahab, and said, Ahab, king, there's not going to be any rain till I say so. That's pretty bold, and it had been 3 years, not a drop. So everybody was struggling, and Elijah too, he lived there. So another thing that he had done for the widow, her son died, and he actually raised her son from the dead. I mean, that's pretty awesome. That's pretty incredible power for God to allow a person to have. I mean, this man served him. And we know about the big showdown, the wonderful, famous story up on Mount Carmel. But it's really a great point. The idea was, okay, been 3 years, guys, I'm preaching at you, you hate my guts, you think I'm the whole problem. Look, you're all worshiping Baal, you think he's great. I say God's the real one, let's have a contest. You get over here and put your little altar together, and I'm going to go over here and make one for God. And you can start out, you can call to your God, and I'll call to mine, and we'll see who answers. That ought to be clear enough, right? No mistake in that. If you see the fire come down, you'll know for sure who's the real one. Now, there were a lot of watchers, but let's get this. Do you know there were 450 prophets of Baal and 400 more of Asherah over here? So there's 850 prophets on this side. Elijah's over here by himself. 1. 850 to 1. So we know the story, it goes on, and they call, nothing happens, and it gets to the evening, and he drenches his altar with water, soaks the thing, soaks the wood, soaks everything, covers up the rocks, the trench, and one prayer to God, and God, fire licks it all up. It was dramatic, and they chased off and actually killed all the false prophets, and it was a wonderful victory. And then Elijah says, I think there's a little cloud over there. And it got bigger, and he went to Ahab and he said, you better hurry in your chariot for the town because you might not get there. This storm's going to be a big one. And God gave Elijah the ability to run faster than that chariot, and he beat him to town. And it's neat. Can you imagine anything more neat and wonderful to be used like that? And of course, we know the next little part. He gets a note from Jezebel, who's really the power behind the throne, saying, you're a dead man in 24 hours. And he takes off. And we think, how on earth did you do that, Elijah? You just saw miracles of God. You walked it. You raised the dead. But here's something we forget sometimes. Elijah, that was exhausting on that mountain. Elijah had been blamed. He had gone hungry. He had been in the wilderness. He had probably been chased around different times. He had preached to no avail. He had done that huge thing, and instead of seeing some kind of big revival, he gets a death threat. That man was exhausted. Absolutely exhausted, emotionally, physically, and in that state, you just don't think clearly, and he takes off. Well, did God start yelling at him and say, I can't believe it, I showed you all these powerful things about me? Nope. He sends an angel to feed him. A couple times, lets him rest, sleep, and then he tells him to go to Mount Sinai again, that good old mountain. And we know what happened when he got there because God said, Elijah, what are you doing here? And Elijah's like, well, God, I'm just the only one left, and they're out to kill me. It's horrible there. So, God sends the fire and the earthquake and all this stuff, and he gets all done with that, it gets quiet again, and the little voice says, what are you doing here? Interesting, Elijah doesn't change his story one bit. He doesn't say, now I see it, God. Nope. God, I'm the only one left, and it's terrible, and they're trying to kill me. And then God says, okay, Elijah, I got 3 things for you to go do. I want you to anoint a couple kings, and I want you to go find Elisha to be your successor and your friend and anoint him. Oh, and by the way, Elijah, I have 7,000 others that have not bowed to Baal. And it's like, wow, God, I didn't know. And we know he went back, and he did that. And what do we get out of that? That it's okay if you get tired. It's okay to rest. You need it. God doesn't expect when we volunteer or say, we'll do something for you, God, that we're supposed to go like nonstop, on and on and on and on and on, just forever and ever and ever, and never have a doubt, and never have a discouraging moment, and never be afraid. And he used that time to meet Elijah's needs and to re-encourage him to go back and finish what he had to do. I would like to close with sharing one other person with you. Now, I practiced this yesterday so I could get through this, but I don't know if I will because this is about my mom. So we'll see if I can. I really did very great yesterday in the car when I was doing my little thing all about my mom. But there's another category we haven't talked a lot about, and that's people who maybe are sick or recovering, who can't get out like they'd like to. My mom died a couple years, 2.5 years ago. She was 89, which is a good long life. The thing about it, it was a life lived in pain. When she was 24, she was diagnosed with an osteoarthritis, and that was those years before were the only ones she knew without pain because it was chronic after that. She, back then, they didn't have a lot of the fancy medicines they have nowadays, so they put on this aspirin regimen, which totally destroyed her stomach. So even when they got better things, she couldn't eat. It'd make her so violently sick. I'd seen her many times drink a little milk, and eat a couple crackers, and that was all she could have. My mother had 4 operations for 3 different kinds of cancer in her life, the last one when she was 82 years old. She had a stroke in 1998, and never fully regained her voice. But you know, my mom could laugh, and that didn't go anywhere. And you know, we'd call her up or talk to her, and I remember my mom's laugh, and it was great, because it was like, wow, underneath was all that stuff, but the laughter. But ironically, when she was a little younger and could still go to church, and she would hide all that pain, and people criticized her. They'd say, well, you're not volunteering enough. How come you won't do this or that or this? And how can you explain what you're covering up just to be there? In 2006, she nearly died from congestive heart failure under the care of a horrible doctor. By the time my dad got her into the emergency room there in their hometown, the doctor who saved her life thought she was at the tail end of some kind of horrible disease, and he said, do you want me to even try and save her? And he knew what to do. I don't remember how many pounds, but I know it was a huge amount of fluid, maybe 50 pounds, maybe more, that they drew off my mother. And she was able to, like, go again, at least the way she had been that way before. And by the end of her life, the last year, she came here and lived with me, and of course used a walker. But in that walker even, when she would hold on to it, she was bent like that, staring at the floor when she stood up. So you might say, what on earth could my mother do? She wanted to be a music teacher and never got to go to college. She never worked, never had a car that she drove, but she could pray. She had a big list of missionaries, and there would come all kinds of neat missionary updates, and she'd keep track of them all and keep a list. And we'd always go to her first, because I knew she really had the time and she really meant it. She would pray. But she also could encourage just by being positive. I mean, it was unthinkable to me that someone could be in that much pain. My mother told me that last year of her life that she had not slept through the night in 50 years. I just couldn't imagine it. And she also could inspire and encourage, because, you know, I'd want to go and tell her all the horrible things happening, and then she'd say, now, take it to God, trust him, he's going to work it out. And sometimes I'd want to say, Mom, I want to gripe a little first, just let me gripe, okay, and when I get out of my system, then, okay, we'll get to the God part. But it was always there. And so in closing, what does this say for us? There really are no limitations for you, me, serving God, other than our unwillingness. Now, I don't think that means that everything you get asked to do is what you're supposed to do, because God's the one that we're to listen to. Although I think people can lead us sometimes, things they observe, encourage us and things like that. But for us, I don't think we're going to see a burning bush, and probably not a bunch of earthquakes, but that still small voice in there. That little nudge, maybe, that little thought that won't go away. And you can try to get out of it, and you can try and talk it down. But if you are being led by God and you ignore it, you're going to get kind of uneasy after a while and really have to cover it up, because God's asking. He's asking you to be willing. And the thing I think we also miss is sometimes we're on, oh, they need me to do, oh, I've got to do this. There's nobody to do this, like it's all a task. But if you say yes to God, there's something that happens to you in your spirit. There is a presence of God that's special, and I think more than what we experience, because you knew you said yes to him, and it's a blessing. I want to close with a quote from Chuck Swindoll, because he's a great writer, and I couldn't think of any way to say this better than the way he said it. God is full of grace. All he asks of us is a willing heart. He doesn't expect perfection. He doesn't expect you to have all the answers, all the ability, or all the courage. He doesn't even require you to spell out each detail of his call. He just asks you to be available and take that first step of faith in the direction he's pointing. And I close